Okay, let's get started. Hello and welcome to today's session, The 5 Ways to Block Fraudsters Without Blocking Revenue, where we're going to talk with experts from Count, Jagex, and Ekata as they share advice for addressing evolving fraud schemes and industry regulations. My name is Ashley Steele, and I'm a Senior Demand Gen Marketing Manager here at Count. Now, I'm excited to introduce today's panelists, Brady Harrison, Customer Analytics Solution Delivery Director at Count, Lauren Monks, Fraud Analyst at Jagex Games, and Gavin Barker, Director of Partnerships at Ekata MasterCard Company. We are fortunate to have this panel of experts here with us today because we know that preventing fraud is challenging, and almost no one is more familiar with the struggle than online gaming and iGaming or gambling companies. So we thank you all for your time.
So from what we can see, this aligns pretty closely with how the industry is growing as a whole, right? New account fraud is kind of the most common option, and that makes sense given kind of where people are in the interest rate life cycle, right? We really need to grow customer acquisition. So we're seeing consistent growth, but Statistica reporting global revenue for online gaming is up to reach over about 24 billion in 22. That's about a 10% growth over 2020 with expected continued growth, 10% each year through 2030. So if you look at the compound annual growth rate, we're talking like $100 million, or I'm sorry, $100 billion industry overall. And so I would expect to see more events online as well as just more people, right? We're looking crossing over the billion person mark. Expect that to hit, right? We were talking a little before about gaming for everyone, right? Nearly everyone plays uh, games, and more often, those are becoming online games that consumers, globally are engaging with. Like I said, right, games are more than just like active publishers, people who make games or gaming, right? There are people who distribute those games like Google Play and the Apple Store, right? Physical brick and mortars like GameStop, right? If you're in the meme stocks, but looking at Steam as well, digital distribution. Then there's how do I watch and have other people play these games? Places like Twitch and YouTube Gaming, actual hardware, right? We need the kind of material to play and enjoy these games, right? Sony, Nvidia, right? All of the graphics cards, bit of it. Places to watch games, right? We're seeing esports arenas open, around the globe. Esports teams, right? Developers like generating actual tools to use with games or while gaming, and then ultimately what we think of like people who publish games and make games, right? When we think of gaming, most people are probably only going to think of publishers and developers, but there's all of this ecosystem around gaming that is really supporting it and lifting it up as an industry. And then that ultimately, for the folks on the phone, will drive revenue and customer acquisition of like getting people through your funnel on Twitch or sponsoring an esports team. That kind of stuff is ultimately part of the ecosystem as a whole. It's not just game studio publishes game and then that game just like magically appears in someone's home, right? The whole ecosystem of playing it. Big stuff like most of the vertical, seeing a lot of account takeover, right? I think the industry as a whole has done a really good job at preventing payment risk, kind of in general, right? Whether that's credit card or debit or ACH, right? There's a really strong trend that hey, we're going to deal with chargebacks and we're going to deal with authorized payee fraud and all of that stuff. What's happening more is people are coming in through the side door as these accounts have more value, right? If you look at a Steam account could have tens of thousands of dollars of games of value as well as items in those games are additional value. Like for a gaming, right? These accounts can have tens or hundreds of thousands, right? Make a big bet on the EPL, and all of a sudden my $1,000 account is a $100,000 account, right? If you bet on Rexall to win, you'd be doing pretty well. So now you have a huge account. New account, right? As you're offering these promos, if you watch any sporting or any esports events, littered with, hey, bet today and get X bonus. And so people are generating accounts to take advantage of these free play bets, right? If you're smart enough, right, open two accounts on both sides of a money line bet for free play, and then net you're even money, if not up money on these free play bets. Promo abuse is kind of a similar vein. And then all the after the fact stuff of customers saying, I didn't really make this purchase for this game that what I'm bad at, right? I opened a bunch of loot boxes and didn't get what I wanted, so I'm going to charge these back. Or I bet on the Chiefs to lose to the Jets because I hate Taylor Swift, and now I'm mad because they definitely didn't, and I'm going to charge back that payment to that gaming channel, daily fantasy, whatever. And so all of these are kind of condensing down into, hey, we're done a really good job stopping third party abuse. Now it's moving all of these other avenues of risk for gaming and iGaming, right? We're starting to see some convergence in risk profiles now that we've moved beyond the pure play chargeback risk.
Great information, Brady. Now that leads us to our first question for the panel, which is, what is your strategy when it comes to AML, KYC compliance, and how do you protect your consumers from themselves?
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. I think, especially over the last 7 or 8 years or more, especially in the iGaming space, we've seen tighter regulation kind of coming in key verticals when it comes to AML and KYC compliance. And a good thing. It helps the industry kind of shed some of the historic bad press that it got, and certainly is beneficial to do that. I also think that any legitimate operator is wanting to do these types of checks, because being able to validate that a genuine individual is who they say they are and poses a low risk to your business that isn't on sanctions and PEPs lists and things like that is only the ethical thing to do. I think when it comes to kind of looking at the strategies that operators can leverage and gaming customers as well, I mean, there's a plethora of these types of companies out there these days. When we look at, the KYC side, things have really moved on from the days of, basic kind of ID style checks, which was just looking to match a person to an address and looking to see if their date of birth was validated. We now have a lot of solutions out there that can look at facial biometrics and liveness detection, that will look at document verification. These are all very useful tools that consumers have become used to using. I mean, facial biometrics is quite straightforward. Most people use it to get into their own phone on a very regular basis. So I think when it comes to the strategy around this, it's about kind of leveraging the right technologies at the right times throughout a user journey. And it's quite important to look at it not just from the onboarding side of things. I think as Brady mentioned there, onboarding is only one interaction point within that consumer life cycle. So being able to do robust checks there, but then continue those checks throughout monitoring, specifically when we talk about things like anti-money laundering, doing regular checks or cleanses on your database to, see if anything has altered. I know over the last few years, especially the last 2 years, with some of the things that are happening, especially in Europe, things like the sanctions list is continually evolving and changing and being updated on a daily basis. So being on top of that and spotting that and having, those kind of robust holistic processes in place is very vital. And I think kind of a side piece to that, but somewhat incorporates when we talk about, protecting consumers from themselves. I know within the iGaming space, we talk about responsible gaming, responsible gambling, and it's got a lot of focus, and again, quite rightly too, because some of the after effects of somebody that goes down that route can be, hugely devastating. And again, I think, the iGaming space has kind of been on the forefront of this, being able to look at how do we identify patterns of behavior where we can, very early on spot potentially that an individual has got a problem with gambling, and how do we spot that? So again, things like transactional monitoring, looking at player profiling to see, what games, how do they use, how do they normally move around within the app, and then start to spot frequencies if their behavioral changes. And again, I think we're now at a point where there's a lot of good technology out there that the operators can certainly leverage to help them with this. So I think, together they form a very holistic process, but it's about essentially having those right products and solutions in a solid waterfall that works for you, that applies minimal friction to the good users, but applies the right amount of friction when you need to apply it. But I definitely think, nowadays there's a good number of solution providers out there that can be leveraged to assist operators within that space, and that's just my thoughts.
Yeah. So from my side of things, the whole AML kind of side of thing it's not a huge part of what I encounter really at all, because of the nature of the products and the thresholds and the like. Cost wise, in order for someone to make enough money from AML by using our products and then selling them on kind of black market methods, like through Discord channels and the like, they would have to do it on such a scale that every single anti-fraud rule and heuristic we have would be like sounding alarms. But for us, our focus is more on the side of it of like, okay, how do you protect consumers from themselves? We know that gaming addiction is a very real thing. It happens to a lot of people. It's not, considered up there with kind of gambling, drugs, drink. But when you look at the amount of money some people spend, it is a huge problem to them psychologically and to their quality of life, and can get into debt and the likes. So kind of this is an opportunity of kind of marrying doing the right thing ethically in protecting your customers, while also protecting yourself from things like mass chargebacks out of buyer's remorse or regret or the like. So, for example, we have a lot of data on our back end that monitors transactional history and spending. And if our players get through that threshold, our customer support team will send a concern message to them through their inbox, check on them, make sure this is something they're comfortable with. Are they happy to do this? Do they need to talk to anyone? And if they express problems with the money they're spending in game and express concern, we can then ban the account at their request. We can block the fund source with our payment service provider or our anti-fraud solution, which is account. And we can put payment restrictions on the account in terms of how they can pay, to kind of really try and reduce that volume and save them from themselves, as it were.
I think the other thing I'd probably add to that as well is, and you touched on it there, Lauren, is that internally you have a lot of data. Use that data intelligently to be able to identify patterns and anomalies, but also don't be worried or concerned about looking at third-party data providers that can add additional enrichment and additional signals in. When we look specifically at responsible gaming, there's certain companies you can go to, like GamStop and people like that, where consumers have self-excluded, and you can leverage and access that data to cross-reference. But again, I also think the iGaming side of the world is really taking this on and really gone for it. I mean, you see a lot of the apps and the games now where you have the option to take a timeout. You can set spending limits and deposit limits. So there's a lot being done to try to minimize what can ultimately be quite a disastrous thing in somebody's life if they go down that route. But I think, leveraging internal data and looking at third parties as well is always very useful to do.
All right, wonderful. That brings us to our next question, which is, how do you use dynamic friction to improve the customer experience while still blocking fraudsters?
Yeah, from our perspective, when it comes to kind of fraud strategy as a whole, your fraud system should be totally opaque to the world, right? They good customers shouldn't know that you have a fraud or identity risks service, and bad customers should know, but they hit a glass wall. They don't know where the wall is and isn't. And so a big part of that is setting up, using machine learning, different points in either the journey or kind of the payment flow to provide a little extra friction that is not obvious to the end user why it occurred. Some caveats, right? For some customers, you want to make them feel safe and secure. And so you may like, hey, let's do some MFA. But in most instances, you really want to kind of have a slider based on the risk. And so, new high net worth uh, player who wants to spend $5,000, that's probably fine, right? Use some machine learning to say, what's the risk profile of this individual bet or this individual skin purchase for a game, right? A risk policy of we're going to 3D secure any payment over $5,000. You're going to start seeing a lot of $4,999 bets, right? Stuff like that. And so if you can set, hey, maybe it's $100 and we take some machine learning risk profile stuff, and that dynamically introduces friction into that experience versus setting all of these hoops that your good customers have to jump through and that bad customers can quickly, figure out the somersaults. And that's what we really think of. Apply friction dynamically in different parts of the experience relative to your risk profile. So new account creation and you don't offer really any promos, very minimal risk, maybe just an email liveness analysis, right? A customer changing bank account information in their gaming, right, or withdrawing, that's a super high risk event. And so put a little friction in there based on that customer's tenure, right? Did they just change emails, right? All of that stuff. Same with gaming. And so you should put these gates up where appropriate, but they shouldn't be like hard rules of X, Y, Z, then do A. That's pretty easy for fraudsters to navigate around, and your good customers will just get frustrated. Like a high net worth person is like, I hate having to 3D secure every time I bet on the Lakers or I bet on Chelsea. That's annoying, and so I'm going to use another platform. Brand new customer bets at $10,000 on a French ping pong match at 2 a.m. That's like, this is abnormal. And so let's change our risk profile there. Unless that customer is like the biggest French ping pong fan in the world, then you want to make sure they can bet their money. So dynamically applying based on the context that Gavin and Lauren were talking about around that whole customer.
And I think one way of doing this as well, which isn't even necessarily so strictly set around the kind of ML side of things, or obviously you can use that to assist, is I think the willingness to look at for your low risk transactions or transactions where you have minimal risk and very little data points is kind of, if you're using like a static rule system, is to use, say, guaranteed acceptance, right? So if you have, so for us, a brand new account with all the data points we have for our accounts, right? It's perfectly reasonable that a brand new player wants to buy a membership subscription to the game on a fresh account, right? That makes perfect sense. That's not suspicious. It's a low cost, low risk transaction to allow them to do that. But there are not going to be sufficient data points to create any kind of rules or blocks there at that point. We can't say, oh, well, they've logged in and then not logged in for X amount of time, or they haven't done any quests in game, or they haven't gained any levels in game, because it's a perfectly normal thing to do. We also introduced a game mode recently that people tend to play in groups. So it's not unusual for those accounts, one fund source to buy multiple sets of membership because one person is buying for their play group, right? So you have to kind of have a willingness to not be quite so risk averse, and to kind of look at what you can do to allow those transactions when you have no information. As long as your kind of checks and balances and your monitoring is in place and in a good place, you can afford to be a little bit more kind of loosey-goosey with some of that stuff to make sure that your new players or new adopters are having the best experience possible, because they are, of course, the ones, if they haven't got a long history. We're not talking about someone who's been playing one of our games for 10 years. They're going to be the easiest to scare off if they have a bad time trying to make that purchase. So you have to kind of leverage the kind of LTV versus the initial risk of that transaction.
Right, wonderful. And our next question for the panel, what industry trends are you seeing as it relates to account takeover fraud?
Yeah, certainly. I think from my experience, I've been at a few different kind of fraud solution providers over the last few years, working with a number of iGaming operators and platform providers. And certainly when I first kind of speaking to a number of operators, probably, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, account takeover fraud wasn't really up there as a concern. It was very much kind of the multi-accounting, the bonus abusers, that side of things was very much. But then what we started to see, year on year on increases, was that ATO was becoming more and more rampant within the industry. And I think there's probably a number of contributing factors around that. I think Brady touched on it earlier on. There's a lot more stored value in accounts these days. A lot of players will have money in there, and that's their kind of play money, and they'll place their bets. And if they win, money still sits there. So with that stored value, they become a more interesting target for fraudsters to get into. I think as well now, we're all fully aware of the fact that you don't have to be a computer or whiz kid or cyber intelligence specialist nowadays to commit ATO, because we have fraud as a service, and you can go on the web now, not even on the dark web, but you can actually go out there and hire individuals to create scripts and bots that will carry out an automated attack on your behalf. You can buy compromised credential data that you can use to train that model to then run at that website. So I think, these kind of combinations have started to kind of drive more of the ATO that we've been seeing. And year on year, we have seen increases in account takeover where, typically the MO is that, it's some form of brute force attack, gets into the account and initially looks to, transfer the funds, drain the resources, take the money out. A lot of companies started getting very good at being able to identify potentially the ATO, or even identify that, hey, there was a change of bank account information or payment methodology linked for the payout. And then we started to see actually experience places where the account was breached and actually the funds were just spent maliciously. There was no attempt to withdraw the funds. What we've also seen off the back of that is numerous websites cropping up where actually just getting into the account is the reward in itself, because then they've got the player's name and address and telephone number and email, and then I can go and sell that information online because that's a currency in my world. So it's definitely been an increasing trend, as it has been across many, many verticals, because of a number of contributing factors. And it's something that I would see probably continuing to increase. Although what I would say now is, there's a lot of solid authentication techniques that can be used to identify some of these brute force related attacks. And I know a lot of companies out there are adopting a lot of these technologies. I think Brady touched on it: MFA, device, looking at IP information, velocity, things like that. So there's a lot of things that can be doing, but certainly it has become a much bigger challenge for the industry than it did 6-7 years ago, for sure.
So for us, and again, because of the nature of the games that Jagex produces, specifically the RuneScape franchise has been running for 20 years, right? So we have a lot of accounts that are have been played consistently, have a lot of wealth on them that can be stolen and then sold for kind of real world money through the black market. But when we see ATO, a lot of it is about getting the most bang for your buck. So they will strip the account of anything that they can sell to make money. They will try and make fraudulent transactions on the account because it comes with like pre-baked in transactions on it, right? It has a existing transaction history. So it kind of potentially helps to evade some of our anti-fraud rules and heuristics. Also, they can use it to bot on, to mine resources in game, which they can then sell on. So it offers more to them than just mass creating new accounts. So I would say probably of the fraud we see, about 60 to 70% of it is actually ATO rather than new account fraud. And with the new account fraud, they focus on things like the botting activities because that's all they can get out of those accounts, right? Or some low-level fraud that, because they're newer accounts, obviously the rules are stricter. So another issue is because a lot of these accounts are legacy accounts, They will have existed before things like MFA were made available for our game, which means obviously a lot of the high value accounts are still played and are locked down, but there will be some accounts that have value to fraudsters that haven't been played in 5 years, that don't have the latest security features that we offer installed on them, which make them easier targets for ATO. So one of the ways that we encourage players in game to adopt these additional security measures is by offering kind of like a series of quests in game that kind of teach them about security. Our game is very kind of tongue-in-cheek, humorous with a lot of this stuff. So it's a series of quests to make your account secure, and you get rewarded with kind of loot in game for like doing these things. And I'm aware of other similar games, other MMOs that will give you rewards or in-game pets or something if you enable MFA. Which is obviously good for encouraging people. And if you're selling a digital product, it's not costing you to send those items out every time someone tries to secure their account. So that's just one of the ways that we handle it.
I think the other
linking, yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
Sorry, Brady. I was just going to say one of the things that kind of stuck out for me. I know when we were talking beforehand, Lauren, you mentioned about integrity of the game, and I think that's another sometimes overlooked aspect of ATO. It's not always just about kind of the money in, money out type scenario and that kind of direct line to financial loss. But actually, especially in the gaming industry, people getting into those accounts and then scamming other individuals creates damage to the brand that can drive users away. And then negatively impact your ability to attract net new customers because people tell their friends, "Hey, this is what happened to me. Don't play this game." Yeah, exactly. So and there's been some high profile ones. I know my daughter was a big fan of Roblox back in the day, and she had loads of issues within that. Now they've put mechanisms in place to try and stop it, but that actually drove her from that to go to something else. So again, I think when we do look at ATO, when we talk about kind of getting into the account and draining funds, or even just harvesting the personal data, the bigger thing is that reputational damage to that brand, because that can really have a negative effect on a number of aspects. Sorry, Brady.
Yeah. Oh, I think the risk financially into the brand is really clear. The challenge that we're seeing in the market is what kind of MFA should I use? On a couple mechanisms. One, how do I balance my risk? And touching back on the dynamic friction, how do I confirm that this is the rightful owner of this account in a way that is not onerous? Mm-hmm. And as part of that, it should align with the risk profile of that account, right? If your account is worth less than the email, it's probably, or phone number, it's probably fine to do SMS or email verification, right? So we know that a Gmail account is worth north of 500, south of $2,000 for like an email compromise. And so if your accounts are less than that, it's probably fine to just send email verification. Hey, it looks like you're trying to log in. Let us know if this is the right location, right? And you can approve that. If your account is worth more than an email, like iGaming or some of the accounts Lauren is talking about, you maybe want to go to SMS, where getting access to someone's cell phone number is less expensive than it used to be, but still 500 to 1,000 US dollars for a SIM swap. And so, okay, if our accounts are like 600 or 700, it doesn't really make sense to SIM swap attack a gaming account with $500 in it, right? You have a $200 gap, right? We should think of these fraudsters like businesses, and they need to derive profit, right? What if I SIM swap an account? The SIM swap cost me $200 and the account only has $10 in it. Right? That's a problem, right? That's an L, literally and figuratively. And so if we're moving beyond that range, like especially iGaming or the accounts Lauren is talking about, people think, oh, how expensive can one of these accounts be? Right? You have these accounts, thousands, tens of thousands of dollars, depending on the material in them for gaming. And iGaming, where like sky's the limit, right? Is much as someone wants to hold in that account, they can generally hold in it. And so if you have an account that's worth 10, 20, 30, $40,000, you really shouldn't be only relying on text-based MFA. You need some more robust form of authentication, biometric, right? Or even a link-based MFA or app-based MFA, right? If I find, Gavin posted he just hit a massive pot on like a soccer match, or he's the French ping pong fanatic.
Know me well.
Yes. And I follow him on Twitter and I see that he just posted, he screenshots because he's like anybody excited to win 50, 60,000 pounds. And he posts it. And I was like, okay, well, using some open data, I'll go find Gavin's phone number and then I'll pay somebody, in London or wherever to go smash and grab a sim machine. And now I'll send that MFA token via text to my now new cell phone number. And then now I have access to Gavin's $50,000 win, and I have access to the account so I can change the bank info. That's a real risk scenario that happens all the time. And so you need to have that dynamic friction based on the risk profile of the account, what kind of MFA you should be using to secure that consumer's account. Like, just like I play some games online of pretty minimal value for the account, but the games are worth like $50 to $60. That's probably email would be sufficient. Lauren's example, probably SMS would be sufficient if these accounts are a couple hundred to $1,000. And then some of the accounts, Gavin may be talking about, we're talking 10, 20, 30, $40,000, maybe hanging out in these accounts. You got to have some more advanced non-SMS based, or at least code-based OTP MFA, right? If you're just sending someone a 6-digit code over SMS, right? It's really easy just to walk up and put a Stingray, right, in their office block or whatever, and intercept that, or actually do a SIM swap. And so that's the big risk profile that we're seeing is MFA is getting substantially worse, and the cost to break into emails and phones is going down. So you kind of have a supply and demand curve is kind of going the wrong direction when you're a fraudster, it's great. Cost of doing business is going down and the cost and the price of the goods is going up. But for fraud fighters, providers, that's a huge challenge.
Awesome, great information. I do want to move on to the next question, which is, what are you seeing in terms of first-party abuse in the gaming and iGaming industry?
Yeah, again, good question. I guess what we're seeing is you're probably not shocked, is an increase. First party fraud is not new. It's kind of always been there, but it's grown quite exponentially. I think a number of different reports that I've seen recently around fraud stats across different sectors, not just the iGaming and gaming space, talk that first party fraud is actually the largest fraud type that's happening right now. Again, potentially multiple factors that go into that. You've got certain economic climate situations that are impacting people's, affordability and cost of living. So therefore, not only, these people that wouldn't have even thought about initiating a chargeback, for instance, and, historically suddenly are doing so. I also think that, consumers and certain people are more aware of their ability to initiate these chargebacks now and the simplicity of that. So therefore, why not do it? I also think that there is like somewhat of an attitude shift within sometimes as well, that it's almost become acceptable, almost like it's a victimless crime if I do this chargeback, because they don't see that they're impacting an individual or a person. It's just, hey, it's just a big business and they've got lots of money anyway. So all these kind of factors kind of driving into it, but certainly first party fraud, especially related to payment fraud, has dramatically increased. And it's a challenging one to identify and look at, because it's initiated typically by the genuine individual, and that poses a challenge because they are a real individual. They are who they say they are. They live where they say they live, and all that good stuff which you could normally leverage to spot risk is suddenly a moot point because it is Gavin Barker that's done it. I know in the iGaming industry we used to talk about gambler's regret. Over the weekend, people will have some fun, think they know everything. They get a tip from a friend. They'll put a load of money on a certain event, and guess what? The bet doesn't come in, and first thing they do on a Monday morning is they initiate that chargeback. So I do think it's increased. It's difficult to spot. I think what I would say is that there is a lot of technologies and capabilities out there now can really assist in this scenario. When I was talking to operators in the past, we used to talk about weight of data or weight of evidence so that you can look to dispute these types of events. So leveraging things like device information, if you can say that, well, actually, the Gavin Barker logged on and placed this bet with the same device that he's used multiple other times within his account from his home IP address, alongside of other data, then that starts to give a compelling argument to say, well, it was you then that placed this bet, that played this game. So device and IP information can be very valuable. Behavioral information can be incredibly valuable as well, to leverage within this. So I think there's a lot of potential and technologies and behavioral aspects that it could be used. Then there's also the slightly more downstream aspects where you talk about certain solutions that companies like Ethica, for instance, that can help operators and gaming customers collate data to effectively real-time dispute chargebacks. So there is a lot of good things that can be done to assist, but certainly an ever-increasing vector of attack as such. And again, depending on what happens with economies, it kind of fluctuates up and down, but it's a consistent that's never going to go away.
Yeah, so with regards to kind of first party abuse, this is something I think there's quite actually a lot of overlap between the gaming and the iGaming side of things, especially in terms of buyer's remorse, especially where things like loot boxes are concerned. I once had a customer tell me that he needed all of his purchases from that weekend to be refunded because he cut off his own toe with his lawnmower and was in shock when he made several £100s worth of purchases. So that was an exciting conversation that I had that day. So I would say a significant majority of the chargebacks we actually get are friendly fraud or first party abuse. So either someone taking their mom's credit card out of their purse to make purchases, but more often than not, it's things like forgotten active subscriptions getting charged back. It is things like, buyer's remorse. They decided going into a double XP weekend that they were going to play the game all weekend. They were going to do all this stuff. They were going to have all this progress. And when it didn't work out, or it came to Monday and they realized that, oh no, the electricity bill's due, and they kind of go back and issue those chargebacks. And very much like Gavin was saying, device data, IP, ISP information, we're able to track that, and we're able to say, hang on a minute, you've been making purchases on this account for 5 years on this exact same payment method. You sold the items in game and then transferred the wealth to another account with the same IP that you have also been playing for 5 years. And we're able to issue kind of and fight those disputes, which is great. Something else that I have noticed very recently, just starting to kind of trickle through, is some slightly more tech savvy people making purchases through VPNs to appear as though they are coming through different countries that have different currency and cost thresholds on the transactions, pretending they're making purchases from India or Venezuela or something, even though it's them and it's a legitimate purchase, because they're trying to get more bang for their buck. Now, obviously, this causes all kinds of problems with fraud declines or things being refunded or voided as fraud, because you flip the coin on the risk, right? And you say, hang on a minute, this is too many transactions to just let slide. That's something that's a little bit problematic. And it's not enough of a problem at the moment, where I can't deal with it kind of on a case-by-case business and kind of coach our customer support team through it. And it's not something that I'm having to crack down massively intensely on, but it is something I'm starting to see more, where, someone found out his mate's paying £2 a month for Netflix because they're pretending they're in, the middle of nowhere. And they are now trying to apply the same thing, and that causes a bunch of problems with that. in terms of identifying fraudulent transactions and blocking things, and how you want to take an approach to that.
Great information. All right, we have 2 more questions left. I want to try to get through these so that we can get to our Q&A. The first question is, what forms of authentication are available? Brady, I know you touched on this a little bit. Do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, and so setting aside the regulatory compliance with gaming, right? We need to make sure that those IDs that are being used are real and associated with a person who is of legal gambling age, right? That's pretty critical. But when we talk about what are our options, we can authenticate those customers when they do try to log in a couple different veins, right? You can do some in-app or other kinds of like knowledge-based authentication, really easy. Downsides, if you've ever seen like weird, hey, post these 10 things to find out about X online, those are usually phishing exercises for folks to kind of get an answer to some of these knowledge-based authentication questions. And it's all about, like I talked about, your risk profile and your kind of technical capacity, right? If you're gaming and you're primarily app-based, you could probably just do Face ID or fingerprint is probably enough most of the time, right? If you have somebody who's right 3D printing a fake fingerprint or fake face, then we have other more challenging problems to deal with, and there's stuff you can do. But if that's not an option, then you want to do like some inherency-based authentication, like you have to have access to that actual device. And so, hey, you're trying to do this on the web, we're going to send you authentication to your phone. And then you either have to approve, like push notification or thumb scan, right? Some financial institutions are doing that, and it's really successful. That's like the inherence part of it of something that you have that you can't change. Like your physical device, the app installation. But it all breaks down into that friction curve. What makes sense? The easiest is probably stuff in ways you already talk to your consumer. So for most folks, an email is probably enough. But for the gaming, that's where we started. And certain iGaming, we get into super high value accounts, and then you got to explore the higher end. You should treat what you're doing closer to a bank than a game at that point. So look at what financial institutions do. What happens when you log into your bank? Those are the kinds of solutions that you should probably explore based on the cost of your accounts. But for 90% of businesses, email authentication is probably good enough. But for the folks on the phone, you're the hard 10%. And so you have to make decisions like, do we want to do SMS? Do we want to use authenticator apps? Like if you use Salesforce or Microsoft products, right? They have native apps for authentication that you can use, or like the Google Password Authenticator, that kind of stuff. Those are really the options that your customers are going to be comfortable with. But it's making it so the minimum number of people who get those get them, and the majority of the people who get them are fraudsters who can't get past them.
And then our last question for the panel is, do you see a lot of promo abuse in gaming and iGaming? If so, how do you tackle that?
Yeah, I mean, certainly from my kind of background with the iGaming space, yeah, promo abuse, bonus abuse, or multi-accounting, kind of all terminologies around the same MO. Individuals or groups of individuals, and some could be opportunistic, some are organized, essentially creating accounts en masse. Certainly big problem in iGaming, probably up there as the number one fraud and abuse type that pretty much every operator is tackling. Again, as I said before, there's all kinds of contributing factors to it. One of the key, I guess, two of the key aspects really there is the fact that it's a highly competitive industry to attract new players. And in order to do that, there is a lot of welcome bonuses. I think Brady mentioned it before, you bet £5, get £10 this, or do this and get that. And that's kind of a red rag to a bull when it comes to the fraudsters. They see that, they target it, and they go after it. And the ability now with the amount of personal data that's just widely available for purchase and to scrape and to get, creates this, the big issue we have with synthetic ID, that then you throw in the ability of bot related activity, and you can suddenly scale up so astronomically to attack a website. I know from in the past, one particular operator who I won't mention, they ran a very aggressive promotion around the time of Cheltenham. And the promotion went well. The marketing team were very happy, huge increases in registrations and signups, fantastic. The risk team and the payments team were less enthusiastic because they saw at the back of that absolutely stacks of problems when it came to chargebacks. And they also saw multiple accounts all linked together. So it is a difficult one to tackle. It is a big problem. But again, there is a lot of cool tech now that can be leveraged. We talk about things like passive authentication. Akata specifically looks at being able to segment consumers' profiles based on the risk association, device information, IP information. Even going back to what we mentioned before on the KYC side, even just the document and facial biometric aspect starts to eliminate that. But again, it's about putting the right processes in place that are going to allow the 99.9% of good customers to do what they want to do without putting them through an onerous process. It's about dynamic friction, applying friction when it is actually needed to be applied. So I think certainly a big problem, will always be a problem unless people just suddenly stop doing bonuses. I know some of the measures around kind of only giving the bonus after a first deposit has helped, but it's still a big challenge out there. And tackling it really, again, is looking at the different solutions that are available out there in the market and seeing how they will work for you, test those, see how they work with your customer base and moving from there.
So a promo abuse is something very, very different for us, and it actually becomes more of a problem of relationship management than payment fraud. So we are in partnership with Twitch. We have been for a while, and we regularly give away a week's worth of membership through Twitch. So obviously you have the initial issue of cannibalization of paid membership by that, but that's something that's already worked out by a data team and marketing and the like before that promo goes live. But what we find is the people that were buying membership for botting new account fraud, they go to Twitch and get it for free, because if they don't have to commit fraud, like payment fraud, to get what they need, why would they? So for us, it's about trying to also help minimize bad actors being funneled to our partner and causing them problems and potentially causing us, a relationship issue with the partner that we're kind of doing a promo for. So that's kind of how that factors in. We don't give away the items that have in-game gold value that is the majority of our fraud targets for kind of sale on the black market and the like. Those items aren't given away. So it's mostly around kind of membership for what membership offers to fraudsters in terms of where they can go in the game and things they can do in the game that are only available to members that are more lucrative for them down the line. The thing is, and it's something that's also quite different, I think, in gaming versus iGaming, and it's something that kind of Gavin and I have discussed previously, is that people have no loyalty in iGaming. Like, no one goes, I'm going to pass up that promo for that company because I'm committed to this other gambling app. No one does that. It's not a thing. Whereas for us, if we don't have a promo giving away a week's membership live on Twitch, someone who plays RuneScape 40 hours a week isn't going to go, oh, well, I'm going to go play World of Warcraft instead. Because I haven't got this free promotion. There's an amount of brand loyalty there that actually serves to reduce the risk of promo giveaways.
Amazing information. Thank you all so much. All
Wondering
right.
if I have any questions on French ping pong now, thanks to Bruce.
Right.
Your darkest secret has been revealed.
I am blown away by the opportunities for gaming for like obscure sports. We're way down some questions. The risk profile here is, this is why we want to have dynamic friction. let's say you're gaming and you set a line on a French ping pong match in the middle of the night, and that match is fixed. Weird stuff happens, and all of a sudden you see a $10,000 or $20,000 bet on an event that usually gets hundreds or no bets. That's a from a risk profile of fraud, something weird is going on. And so that's why some dynamic friction makes sense. And there was an article about this. It was specifically like Latvian women's ping pong matches in the middle of the night. There was some weird betting behavior going on, and then one of the large iGaming companies found that there was some collusion and potential money laundering going on in this activity. And so that's why you need a robust strategy. If you're like, hey, we only look at or authenticate bets over $10, right? All of a sudden you're getting a flood of $10 bets into Latvian women's ping pong. That's the actual examples that people are betting on. These pretty obscure sports that normally don't see the kind of volume that you would see from a traditional like cricket, soccer, football, right? Basketball, that kind of stuff. MMA, right? That all that kind of stuff is a risk profile that you can mitigate if you have dynamic friction in that, or just really just monitoring. And that's moving more into the risk side rather than fraud, but a similar vein.
Yeah, it's interesting you touch on that. I mean, we've all heard and probably seen the stories of some of the rigged football or soccer matches in the Serie A, and players agreeing with friends of when they'll get themselves a yellow card and things like that. So yeah, collusion is an interesting one, and the ingenuity of fraudsters to organize and rig outcomes is, yeah, sometimes quite frightening.
Yeah. So I know we have a couple of minutes left. If we don't get to your questions, we'll make sure to send you a response via email. But let's go ahead and answer this question. So I'm in the online gaming space too, and we typically see a lot of excessive in-game spending around the holidays. What is the best way to filter through what's fraud and what's a legitimate purchase before it's too late?
So one of the ways that I would deal with this is by having almost like separate curated rule sets. Also kind of looking into what your average velocity of payments are, so that you can adjust those margins going into key times. So yeah, we see it at Christmas, we see it at Easter, we see it when we have big events in game, or new releases in game, right? Like a new chunk of story or a new quest or new skill or something. Anything that drives a lot of people, you will see that spike that could potentially trigger things. So kind of having a set of alternative rules almost on the back burner that aren't actively triggering, that you can switch in when it's necessary using timed rule sets. That tends to be the way that I handle it. Depending on obviously the size of your team and the size of your operation and the scale of the sales, that can be more or less time consuming or onerous as you want. But yeah, making specific plans and allowances around those times, high traffic times, is definitely something that does benefit.
And a lot of the companies I've worked in the past used to call them or refer to them as seasonal rule sets.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I refer to them as timed because that's what they're called on the drop down menu, but essentially that is what it is, right? It's one of those universal kind of things. Just setting those allowances. The strictness of our rules going into Christmas is very, very different to, a Friday afternoon in March. Like, yeah.
So we are going to try to squeeze in one more question from the audience. It is left the presentation, but my company is in the hospitality industry, and we're just now looking for a fraud solution. I'm wondering if fraud solutions can be customized or if they're more one size fits all.
So from our perspective, the methods that people use vary wildly, industries, but the actual background fraud is unfortunately for most really similar. And so while there are some custom solutions for specific verticals, I think most people would benefit from a more broad-based approach. Just because you have never committed fraud in hospitality doesn't mean you can't identify risk in other avenues where you have. And so they are definitely customizable and usually best practice to engage with kind of a wide consortium of networks and users versus pinpoint solutions.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think, you can take, a solution that may not be specifically fine-tuned to your vertical, but however, the outcome and the data that's coming in, you can create the rules specific to yourself anyway. But tools or solutions, however we want to refer to them, that have that kind of consortium model can be very beneficial. I know from my past, very often we would see an individual that had committed fraud in, say, an insurance vertical would then suddenly go to a completely different vertical. And being able to know about the fact that that person's committed fraud somewhere else is indicative of risk in itself, because they've proven a track record of be fraudulent or high risk. So leveraging that data, even if it's not specific to your vertical, is very beneficial. We used to call it crossover. We would see devices perform certain things in one industry and then boom, they'd appear in another. So again, that intelligence is very crucial, because fraudsters don't just commit fraud against banks in Mexico. The world is their oyster thanks to the digital world we live in. So they can commit fraud from their flat or their basement or wherever they are to anyone, anywhere, at any time.
Yeah. And if you've got your own data to use to customize how those rules look, for example, we pull in-game data like number of quests or levels and things like that to differentiate between like new account fraud and ATO. You can essentially tailor it to your vertical in some of the rules that you use.
Wonderful. Well, I know we're at time, and just want to say thank you, Brady, Lauren, and Gavin, for an excellent discussion. Thanks as well to all of our audience for joining. We hope you gained some valuable insights and enjoyed this presentation. And we appreciate you all for being here, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.
Everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.